and gentlemen, please welcome President, Arizona State University, Michael Crow.
How's everybody doing? So, sadly, here's my role. So there's been a creature living in this box. Yeah, he's still alive. And so I'm here to get you ready for him. And so here's what they decided to do. They decided to bring out a professor to give a nice little academic lecture at 8 o'clock in the morning. So that's why you're here. So those of you in the back, try to stay awake. Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to talk a little bit about a challenge that we have in this conceptualization about how to move forward in terms of reaching the broader community of those learners that need to be educated, that are going to need to be educated continuously through their life, and the problems that we have with the structural designs, the designs of educational institutions, the design of instructional institutions, which are different than universities, the design of companies and others, such as many of you that are here, that are involved in the educational space. And so what I want to walk through is a concept of some things that we need to do and some places that we need to go to make some things happen in terms of what I call designing partnerships for social impact and transformation. The basic assumption here is that we've reached a point in the evolution of our socio-technical system in which our society is embedded, where learning will be an essential ingredient of everyone's life for the entirety of their life, not just for a fraction of their life. Intense learning will be essential to everyone's life going forward. Now, most of you will say, well, that's not possible. That's not possible. Let's go back at 500 years in time, 1,000 years in time. The world was completely different. Our society was completely different. We've reached this threshold as a result of technological change, as a result of the speed of change. We've just reached a threshold where nothing will be the same. So let's go forward. So one of the things that's really important, if we think that, for instance, we've got problems, we've got about a quarter of the population not getting through high school. In the United States, we've got half the people that start college not finishing. We've got all kinds of problems out there in our system. You got to go back and look at the design. Herbert Simon's one of my favorite academics. He's a big thinker, Nobel Prize winner. He won a Nobel Prize in economics, although he never studied economics, which is a fantastic thing to be able to do if you're an academic. It just sort of shows those economists that you don't even have to be one to beat them. Everyone who devises courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. So here's the preferred one. We'd like to work against income disparity. We'd like to work against learning gaps. We'd like to provide for rapid economic growth. We'd like to not have these huge ups and downs that we have in the current cycles of the economy. So we got to design. Here's the existing design. It's a linear design. You either go to school, K-12, then head off to your career for the rest of your life. Your age is on the bottom. You go to K-12, you go to technical school or some kind of vocational training, then you go out to your career, or you go to college. A few people go to college, and then even fewer number of people go to graduate school, and then you go off to your career, and that's it. That's the traditional system. This system is completely, totally, and utterly inadequate. It is unable to respond. It's not likely to respond. It's not likely to change very easily. It is poorly designed. It was useful for the past, not useful for the future. So what we need to do is to design a universal learning system. We need, in that system, not only traditional students, people that we think of as traditional students that many of you are focused on here, who pursue something like an undergraduate degree, who then pursue that because their life can be empowered, their career can be empowered, and so forth. We also need to understand that from that traditional system, here's the results that we have. 36 million people between 25 and 65 started college, have no degree whatsoever. I won't walk you through what that means for them in the marketplace, but it means about 100% reduction from where they could have been in terms of income. Second result, here's their income. That's a design result. So we talk about, how many of you have heard about the concerns about income disparity? You've heard concerns about the fact that there's wide social gaps that are occurring. You guys are all up to speed on that, right? Well, here's the result, one of the second results of the present design. Here's the third result for those that are able to continue in their education through college and attain a bachelor's degree. That's a massive difference. In 1975, that difference between no bachelor's degree and a bachelor's degree was almost not measurable. And today, it's this gap. Here's another result of the present design. 69% of the people who started college but did not earn a bachelor's degree work for a for-profit company. They're in the workforce. Very difficult once you're in the workforce to move forward. So here's our objective. How do we connect the workforce, which is the American model, as opposed to the government? How do we connect the workforce to lifelong learning opportunities? How do we do this at scale? How do we make education a social imperative to national success? Now, some will say that it is, and here's where the debate goes. We've then assigned the entire assignment to the government. That's not going to work anymore. That's an inadequate design. It's too small. It's too episodic. It's too expensive. So, how do you design a new universal learning system? Again, the who, you have traditional students, you have workplace-affiliated learners, you got workplace-affiliated cohort groups, all kinds of people that are out there. You've got people that are just out on their own, just wandering around trying to find their way. What do you want? What do you need? Some people want an undergraduate degree or will need one. Some just need a course. Some need a micro-credential. Some need a graduate degree. Some need other things. The point is that different people need different things at different times. And why do you need these things? You need them for these reasons: career adaptation, personal fulfillment, workplace adaptation, or you're actually responding to this rapid change in the socio-technical system. Well, our system now doesn't work this way. It doesn't work this way at all. So we have an idea that we call universal learning. Pre-K, that's in the family where you're raised and you learn your vocabulary, you learn your basic concepts, your basic values. Step one, we call, out of that is the milestone is verbally and conceptually empowered learner coming out of that pre-K space. We do need more tools and more energy and more activity related to that. Then K-12, step two, the milestone is a fully prepared learner. Right now we've got 25% of the population not reaching this achievement. We've got probably 35 to 40% of the population either not reaching this level of attainment in terms of being a fully prepared learner, or they've got some gap in their learning that they encountered along the way. And then beyond that, you become a lifelong learner, and the point here is that it's not about universities, it's not about college, it's about technical schools, universities, colleges, working inside companies, moving back and forth, going back and forth between the workforce, changing the entire model. Unfortunately, here's our problem. We have a huge complexity at the interface between the university itself and the workplace. The cultures are not the same, the funding mechanisms are not the same, even the view of what's a credential or a credit or a certificate is different. Clock speeds are different. Universities move on a certain methodical kind of pathway, less influenced by the day-to-day transactions of the market. Different kinds of stakeholders, different kinds of learning modalities. For this reason, these kinds of things have become so complicated that we haven't figured this out. There's a few programs out there that different universities have put in place. There's a few activities that are happening, but nothing systematic, nothing at scale, given the tens of millions of people working in the workplace who have not been able to attain a higher level of credential or a higher level of certificate. So out there right now, we've got different types of organizations. We have organizations that are focused on information transfer, teaching-only institutions. These are sometimes efficient. These are organizations that work on transferring codified information. They work on creating teaching and learning situations where codified information is transferred. There's a number of these in place, different types of them. A small one like ITT, Technical Institute in Boise, or the Full Sail University, which is a little bit bigger, or University of Phoenix, which is a massive organization involving hundreds of thousands of individuals involved in this information transfer process. This part of the knowledge transfer and information transfer enterprise often all gets called university or college, when in fact these organizations, which use some of those names so that people can understand what they're trying to do, are in fact different. They are taking codified information, moving it into instructional frameworks, and advancing it into other organizations so that it can be properly consumed. Now this chart gives you some sense of higher education. This is a chart that shows each of the dots on here. We're not going to go through the academic chart. Just going to try to show you the variation in higher education. This is every single one of the 1,500 or so institutions in the United States that grant bachelor's degrees. The size of the circle is the number of bachelor's degrees that they are awarding. On the right is their number of Pell, on the x-axis at the bottom is the percentage of Pell Grant recipients, and the y-axis is the graduation rate, which you'll see immediately is correlated. The colors are a classification system that we've derived to identify, and we're not going to walk through this, but just to show you every single different color, every single different size, and the spread of the work going on in these bachelor's degree institutions indicate the differentiation within this community. We've organized these into 12 different types of institutions based on how many students they have, how many Pell students they have, the number of students that, basically the scale of the institution and the distribution of socioeconomic work. Now, how would you organize this? How would you move this forward? How would you link these institutions to the private sector? How would you link these institutions to companies and corporations? There's so much variability and so much difference. There's no one way. There's no easy way. There's no way to do these things. So we think that going forward, universities certainly that get involved in dealing at the macro level with universal learning, which some colleges and universities will be built around certain kinds of building blocks. This green building block is really important. This is different than the information transfer organization. The green building block, think of that as the knowledge core. That's the way in which colleges and universities, through their faculty and their libraries and other things that they have, continuously move towards the edge of what we know, the edge of what we understand. That's the furthering pursuit of knowledge. That's the thing that colleges and universities do. It's the weird thing that we do that nobody understands why we do it. But it's actually at the core of what we do. It's at the foundation. Academic enterprise, think of that as the on-campus learning environment, teaching and learning immersive systems. The knowledge enterprise itself, the little yellow Lego there, is working to support discovery and research, so think of that as research. The learning enterprise is creating new pedagogical tools. This is where you're reaching out to universal learners, and the partnership enterprise means that's where you're doing something with someone else. So let's take a look at what colleges and universities look like. So you have teaching and scholarship university. These are 5 clusters of the 12 clusters are made up of these kinds of universities. So these universities have basically no research activity or very limited research activity. They are powered by and draw from the knowledge enterprise. That is, they're connected to the living, breathing faculty of academia on a global basis. They have various sizes and scales, as you can see with Cluster A, Beloit College, Bennington College, Gustavus Adolphus College. These are small places. And then very big versions of these, Cluster E, BYU, Idaho, UC Merced, University of Hawaii in West Oahu, institutions like this. These classifications, by the way, are based on the data from their performance. Numbers of students, types of students, Pell eligible students, levels of research, amounts of research, and so forth. The point here is, how would you connect any of these kinds of institutions to the broader learning needs, to the broader universal learner objectives? How would you connect these institutions to corporate positioned or company positioned or private sector positioned learners? Here's a second, 2 additional classifications: moderate scale research university clusters. So red again is the on-campus learning environment, yellow is the research and discovery environment. And so here you see American University, Colgate, William & Mary, and in Cluster G, Boise State, Cal State, Long Beach, Florida Atlantic. This just gives you a sense of the different kinds of institutions. Now, one of the things that we're also trying to do in all of this is that the present classification system that we have for universities and the present way that people think about colleges and universities is completely distorted. It's a thing that is basically driven by exclusion. It's driven by separateness. It's driven by a range of other kinds of variables. This kind of classification typology, and imagine, keep the Lego thing in your brain here. Keep the Legos in your mind. The Legos is, how do you ultimately connect to the marketplace? How do you ultimately connect to other kinds of institutions? So this is a second category. Now we're getting a little bit more complicated. Cluster H, University of Arizona, Oregon State, Drexel, smaller academic enterprise, lots of research. Now you start adding Cluster I, Harvard University has lots and lots of research. The yellow, just a few students, but Harvard has Harvard X and edX and other kinds of things. That's the blue box. And you can see other types of things that are evolving. And then cluster J are very large institutions with multiple types of connections, multiple types of enterprises. And that's Arizona State, Purdue, University of Washington, at Seattle, institutions like this. Now, these are not random classifications. These are data-driven classifications on the actual conduct and behavior and outputs of these schools. Now there's workplace partners. Again, think of Legos. So we haven't built mechanisms, and many of you are a part of the kinds of companies that build the Lego connections. So we have retail corporations like Starbucks that we work with at ASU, state governments, technology or manufacturing corporations like Adidas that we work with, the Air Force, where we're working with some large projects with the Air Force. The point here is scale, size, difference. Within these corporations, the different colors, think about the different things that these corporations are doing. So there's frontline workers, there's executive workers, there's IT shops, there's research shops, there's everything that you can imagine within these kinds of corporations. Now, how do you take those universities and colleges of their various types, unless, of course, you want to build an entirely differentiated, at the cost of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, set of teaching and learning institutions, which we don't want to do? How do you connect these colleges and universities of the various types to these organizations? Well, you have to start thinking about that white Lego box in the middle. Some kind of boundary spanning organization. Some kind of way that you can, without negatively impacting either of the cultures on either side. So the cultures, as I mentioned earlier, are highly differentiated. They're so differentiated that the probability that they can meld or blend is near zero. It doesn't work. Some of you might have also noticed that when we didn't build these Lego connecting mechanisms between these kinds of colleges and universities on the left and the kinds of corporate and other kinds of performing organizations in the market on the right, some of the for-profit universities that were built to stand alone haven't been as successful as people had hoped. Certainly their investors. So now how do you do this? So one way to do this is to think about learning system having multiple kinds of configurations, where a major, it could be a small college, it could be a large university, it could be any of the types of institutions that we're talking about, then would build mechanisms and structures and devices linking these organizations together. And the mediating organization, in the middle, in the white Legos, that organization is an organization with a special set of skills, a special set of mechanisms, talent, the ability to understand the two different clock speeds, the ability to understand the two different cultures, the ability to work between the cultures and the different clock speeds, the ability to make these things happen in real time, the ability to find and design the special interfaces. And these special interfaces could be people, technology, systems, analytics, all kinds of things. Another way to do this would be to have a closely coupled organization of multiple institutions. So in this case, you have the private entity on the top, the academic entity on the bottom, and a tightly coupled structure between the two where they're interfacing back and forth. This earlier structure is loosely coupled. This structure is tightly coupled. There's still a separation, there's still a gap, but in this case, they'd be working more in a more focused kind of way. So learning systems have, again, you never know what the scale is. We talked at ASU to a company not too long ago that has over 1.5 million learners in their organized learning environment. And they've asked how can they take 1.5 million learners in their organized learning environment for both their own company and their clients and their product developers and their supply chain, who are now focused on teaching and learning environments on the right side of the equation, where they can have all the technical skills that they're interested in transferring. How do they then plug into the university, and how do they do that at scale? Or maybe not a university, certainly not a university with millions of learners, but perhaps clusters of universities or clusters of types of colleges. And so the point here is, and it may be something that's obvious. Well, most things are obvious, we just can't do them. This is obvious, but we can't do this yet. And so along the way, at least in our case at ASU, we've been trying to think about, well, what do we do? What do we do? How do we do this? So we have lots of experience in building these kinds of relationships on our own. A very successful relationship with Starbucks, an emerging relationship that's off to a great start with Adidas. We have a very good relationship off to a great start with a company called Uber. And so these things are going very well. But then we realize immediately that back at the ranch, back at the university, well, our skill set is not actually best at designing these white Legos. It's a completely different set of skills. And so what would an effective boundary-spanning organization do? That's what we call this. This is a technical term. Again, I apologize for the academic lecture, but this is actually, in a sense, this is a design question. In the theory of designing knowledge enterprises, how do you connect people that are going to need what knowledge enterprises have in real time when those knowledge enterprises, like us, can't interface with these corporations or companies in a way to help the tens of millions of people that are in those organizations working who need access to what we have. And I don't think the answer is going to be to build completely disconnected from the core, the green Lego, completely disconnected from the core instructional entities that just transfer information. So what do? We need to accelerate our understanding of corporate social impact. We need to develop new pathways for learners. We need completely new conceptualizations of employee education and benefit, that is the return on the investment. And how many of you saw the panel yesterday with the CEO of Starbucks and others? Were any of you here for that? Some of you? Yeah. So I think that what Kevin Johnson, the CEO of Starbucks, was talking about was fantastic. They've really decided that Starbucks will produce great products. They'll produce great services. They'll create great places for people to gather. They also want to produce great people. One of their products is great people. And that the people that work at Starbucks and stay at Starbucks will be great performers, perform great services for the company, and those that leave will be better prepared for the economy of the future when they leave. He believes, and we believe with him, that that is a social duty, a social responsibility. Labor cannot in the future be considered to be nothing but a personless, heartless, non-human commodity, where you just take the person, pay what the market will deliver, and deliver the person back to the market when you no longer need them, no better than they were when they came in. So it's a whole new model. We announced with, you'll hear about this later, a new entity. This is what we call In Stride. This is now an attempt at building. Let me just go back. One of these white things here. And the white box is this intermediary. So we have embarked with the Rise Social Impact Fund to create one of these, move this forward, see how it can connect, see the skill sets that can be put in place, see the teams that can be put in place. Can we actually figure this out? Can we actually figure out how to take the knowledge enterprises of several universities, many learning institutions? Can we bring all of that together? And can we do something other than just purvey content? Can we actually be connected in a way where we change the learning outcomes of entire organizations? Now, to do that, we need these special skills brought in from the market, capital brought in from the market to be able to build this interface. Now, we think that ultimately in the white Legos, we will need new technologies, new policies, changes in cultural norms. Otherwise, again, back to the first slide, we're not going to change the design. The design will be unaltered. We won't achieve any difference in outcomes. And 10 years from now, not only will we be talking about income disparities, we'll be talking about social instabilities. We'll be talking about deeper gaps between between the wealthy and the non-wealthy. We'll be talking about economic issues that we don't have the workforce that we need. We're already beginning to get senses of that. We'll be talking about people not being able to adapt quickly enough. So this is something we've talked about before, and I really throw this out to all of you that are here, particularly from the investment side or the technology side. These are technologies and organizations. I won't walk you through them. We can send this to everybody. We need these things. We need a technology to support relationships to build organizational affinity. How do you become connected to two institutions? How do you become connected to the company that you're working at and the learning institution that you're working with? We need conversation-based artificial intelligence-driven tutoring. We have little simple things like that, but not much. We need group learning tools. I'm not going to walk you through all of this, but these are things that we need. There's policies that we need. The federal government is archaic. The state governments are even more archaic. From the states, we need enterprise investment approaches for education. No longer are we just going to go to the taxpayers and say we need X numbers of dollars for students. That's not working. That's not the way the model will work if you have to educate everyone. If you're working to educate everyone, it's going to be a multi-sector, multi-level thing. So again, I'm not going to walk through these. We do need, for instance, Pell Grants to be available throughout the year. Pell Grants are now only available in the fall and spring semester. Too bad. Were people clapping? No. So there are cultural norms and expectations that we need. From employers, can we work to create a culture around education and learning itself? Can we decommodify labor? Can we begin thinking about labor? Even the term is a little bit disconcerting. Can we start thinking about people, learners? Can we start changing the way that we think about the people that work in organizations? Can where you work also be the place where your life is making progress beyond just the work itself? And you say, well, who should pay for that? Okay, well, who should pay for that? Turns out we should all pay for that at all levels, in all ways, not just taxpayers. In society, we need to think about changing the notion in the bottom right there, changing the notion of education being a linear process. I know most people in here are older than 30, some people. I see one or two here older than 30. So who wishes that you could actually be involved in some kind of customized learning that's delivered to you in this kind of seamless way where you have access to things that you wish you had studied, could have studied, want to study, didn't? How many of you just, if it was available and it was available readily and easily for you, would you want it? Come on. That's it? Okay, too bad for the rest of you. And so, in the green box in higher education, we need to increase clock speeds of designing and launching courses and learning materials and assets. We need to come up with whole new ways of entrepreneurial mindset thinking, new ways to derive resources and capital, new ways to make these things happen, while at the same time not diminishing the core characteristics of the culture of academia. You do that by building these boundary-spanning organizations. You do this by finding other ways to solve these problems. Now, I can tell you, having been at this for a while at our own university, all of this stuff is unbelievably difficult. And for whatever reason, you know, I don't know how shocked we are that we've got people bribing people to get to college these days. How many of you were surprised by that? Some of you? None of you? Well, I was surprised, and I'm in the business. I was surprised. I was surprised that people would pay $500,000 to have their child admitted to a particular school. One person who's not been named yet, $6.5 million. And so I don't know what that means other than it means that something's wrong with the design. Something's wrong with the design. If you're learning throughout your entire life, maybe you go to college when you're 18, maybe you go to college when you're 28. Maybe you go to college when you're 38. Maybe you pick up an extra degree, your first degree, when you're 40. It's a system that needs some serious rethinking. So, it's about design, and remember why I'm here. I'm here just because of this animal here. Person, I should say. And so what I wanted to do is just sort of get out some design input to you all, get some Lego ideas into your thinking, and then have you start thinking about, well, what are the structural connection points between the colleges, the universities, the companies, the organizations, and others, and how can we build both technologically, practically, culturally, organizationally, and financially these boundary-spanning, connecting organizations that can help us make these kinds of things happen. So, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome founder and chairman, New Oriental Education and Technology Group Incorporated, Michael Yu.
Distinguished friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So today I'm coming here to introduce you a bit about the Oriental, and a bit about me, and a bit about education. I think most of you, or all of you here, are doing something for education. But education is one of the most difficult things to define, Like if we say hospital is a place like to cure people's disease, or medicine is for the goodness, for the health of the people. But when we are talking about education, what are we talking about? When we look into the dictionary, we'll find that the definition is really very vague. Education is the process of being educated. And then when we find what is called being educated is the process of education. So what does that mean? So human beings has making great progress. From Aristotle's time, he insisted that the earth is the center of the universe. And then when Copernicus came into being, he said that the sun is the center of the universe. And then we come to the natural law of Newton. And then we come to the theory of relativity by Einstein. So every step of the way, we are making progress. We are understanding this world more and more. But coming back to us, today, this world is still full of ignorance, stupidity. We are not making much more progress in humanity as a human being. Sometimes we are still insist some wrong ideas in our mind. So what is our education about? We have been doing education for more than almost 3,000 years. Like about more than 2,000 years ago, we already have those wise people, like Plato, like Aristotle, like Confucius, like Buddha, like Jesus. A lot of so wise people in this world. But today, we are still talking about education. We are still trying to understand what we can do for us, what we can do for our generations. How can we make this world a better place to live in? How can we, at most, understand each other, but not killing each other? That's what we want to do. For me, I want to use me as an example because I was born in the countryside, in the rural area of China. My parents are illiterate. That means they cannot read, they cannot write. This is my mother. Even though my mother cannot read, she's illiterate, but she can serve as my teacher. So come to the definition of education is that if a parent and a teacher want their kids or students to become more, to have a better future, or to become more enlightened, and to have more knowledge, especially to become more humane in their life, and want to do good things not only for themselves, but also for others, for this world, for the society. So I think this is what education means to me, especially for my family. So, all my family, generations by generations, they were living a peasant life. Peasant is not a farmer. A farmer owns a great piece of land. But a peasant means he or she only worked on a very small piece of land, barely can make enough living resources, So what my mother wants me to do is that she does not want me to become another peasant, always living and toiling on a piece of land with backbreaking hardships. So what my mother set up a goal for me is that I should become a teacher. In her mind, a teacher is something like the teacher in the village, still kind of nearby a peasant, but you don't have to go to the field to do a hard job. Because a teacher in Chinese tradition is usually very much respected by those peoples in the village. So those villagers will help the teachers to do his farm work, and to sometimes even to give food for him to eat. And most of all, because he got lots of respect from all the people around. So what my mother wants me to do is to become a teacher. So since she wants me to become a teacher, then what I have to do, or I had to do at that time, is to study more. So from my memory, when I was 4 or 5 years old, I never got any toy. My mother never bought me any toy. I have toys, but was made by my father, who was a carpenter, A carpenter can make lots of toys. So when we have some, small money, then my mother will buy books for me, from the comic books to real books. So since when I was 5 years old, I started to read books, but I didn't know any characters. Chinese characters are very difficult to understand, But very fortunately, I have a sister who is 5 years older than I am. When I was 5 years old, she was already in grade 3. So every time after school, she come to read those comic books or storybooks to me. Little by little, after 1 year or so, I began to learn lots of Chinese characters, and I started to read Chinese books by myself, even before I went to grade 1. So by grade 2, I was able to read Chinese classical books, including like the Water Margin. It was one of the most famous classical books in China, written in half modern Chinese, half ancient Chinese. So from that point on, I become the only boy in my village who can read and who loved to read, and every day spend time reading. From that time on, I began to love studying. And so through all my primary school and middle school, I'm the person who read most all over that kind of community around me. And I began to like to go to school. Schooling becomes one of my most important things in my life. And even though my mathematics is not good, because there's no one who can teach me mathematics in my home, because my parents, they are illiterate. But still, I continued my schooling until middle school. The problem for me is that after middle school, I was forbidden from going to high school, because there was a policy at that time in China. In one family, there was only one person who can go to high school. My sister already went to high school. So I didn't have the chance to go to high school. So I stayed at home doing farm work for half a year. Then in China, the Cultural Revolution finished at that year. Then some of these people, some of my friends in the village, actually they didn't like study at all. They want to quit from high school, because after that period of time, everybody begins to understand that when you go to high school, it's not good for playing. It's good for studying. For study, then you have the chance to take the national entrance examination and then go to university. So the one girl in my village quit from high school because she just couldn't follow up. Then my mother, doing every effort to talk to the government officials to let me go to the high school. So I just went to high school already 1 year after my classmates, my middle school classmates. So I stayed in high school only 1 year and a half. When I went to high school, I began to realize that going to the university is my only destination, because including my parents and me, I don't want to stay in the countryside for all over my life. So I studied hard, but only 1 year and a half high school life, and because I'm in the countryside, at the same time, I have to do a farming job. Then I failed for the first year to take the national entrance examination for universities, and I failed again the second year. And then I continued. I talked to my mother. I said, "Hey, Mom, can you not let me do farm work this year? I want to spend all my time studying. I want to go to some training school so that I can study more." my mother agreed. So I went to one of the training schools, which is run by my high school, and then stayed there for 10 months. Then I took the third national entrance examination, and I got the highest scores for almost every subject in that area. Yeah. And I got enrolled by the best university in China, which is called Peking University, which is equal to Harvard University in the United States, you know. So that's my family education. So come to the conclusion is like this. You know, an education is not somebody who is smarter than you who's teaching you. Education is not a professor telling you knowledge he already knows. Education, a real educator even can be somebody who's illiterate, like my mother, like my father. They cannot read, they cannot write. But they teach you something that you should go beyond yourself. Go beyond your vision of this world. Go beyond of your limitation. And go beyond your natural ability. And you have new talents because education, you can help others. And, you know, to try to push you, to let you have your potential to create and to become more understanding about this world and to become open-minded, to let yourself go out of your way to go to this world, to challenge yourself and to become more tolerant, to go walk far away from ignorance. So this is a good thing when I went to Peking University, because studying at Peking University is a turning point for me. You know, Peking University is very famous in China for free thinking, for independent thinking, and for free spirit, which is not totally like in the United States. Because in the United States, every university, everywhere, every student, for every high school student and universities, you can think whatever you like, you can speak out whatever you like, and then you can write whatever you like, but it's not in China. Fortunate for me, for those 10 years, I stayed in Peking University, 5 years as a student and 6 years as a teacher, actually. For those 10 years in China, from 1980, that year I went to Peking University, until I came out from Peking University, which is 1991, for those 10 years in China, we have this period, which is called liberation period. Liberation of thoughts, liberation of ideas period. For those 10 years period, that means Chinese university students almost can speak whatever you like to speak. You can challenge the authority. You can challenge the ideologies of the whole country, and you can speak out whatever you want to say. So within my time in Peking University, I really learned what is called independent thinking, what is called independent personality, what is called a free mind and a free spirit. So this becomes a new me. Because before that, I only think education, when you go to university, is that you just study your major. If you study English literature, then you study English literature. If you study like mathematics, you study mathematics. But I think education later, I think it's far beyond that. It's far beyond your major, far beyond your examinations, and far beyond what the teacher is talking to you. It's all about how do you come back to yourself, and how you can really become enlightened about this world, and how can you create your own thinking and the discussion about this world. So that's what Peking University gave me. So except the academic knowledges I get from Peking University, I did several things at Peking University. First thing is that I read lots of books. Because when I was in high school, when I was a child, those books are very small books. Those books are designated by the government. So there's no real thoughts, no real philosophical ideas in those books. Especially there's no real contradictory or objections of some kind of thoughts in those books. But since when I was in Peking University, the library of Peking University is one of the biggest libraries in China. So I can walk freely into the library and take whatever books I want to read and discuss whatever books I want to discuss with my roommates and my classmates. So we argued and we debate, and while arguing and debating, we become more mature in our thoughts, in our outlook, the world outlook, the point of view about this world. This is the one thing. I read more books. I got ill when I was in junior, and then I stayed in the hospital for 1 year. During the 1 year in the hospital, I almost read a book every day. So altogether, for 5 years in university, I read almost 1,000 books. So that gives lots of ideas, new things. Go beyond China, go beyond the government, and even go beyond all the people's thoughts about me. I can look into things from very different perspectives. And the second thing is that in Peking University, I made lots of friends. Friends from my classmates, friends from other majors, and friends from professors. So these people also give me lots of new ideas. The good thing is that when I created the Oriental company doing education, I invited some of these friends coming back from the United States or from other countries to me to become partners of my company. And all us together, we bring the Oriental into New York Stock Exchange IPO. So when you have good friends, especially good friends who can help you not only in your thoughts, not only in your life, but also in your enterprises. That's one of the most great things happening in this world. And there was once a movie, like 5 years ago, filmed in China, which is called China Partners, which talked the stories about me and my partners, my university life, and how we tried our best to make something successful. So that's the second thing I have in this world. And there's a third thing I really have advantage in university. That is because my major is English. That means I'm studying English all the time. From a boy from the countryside, didn't know anything about English, then get enrolled by English major from Peking University. And then I started to really learn English, especially reading. So after 1 or 2 years studying English in Peking University, I can study to read English originals. Those originals that sometimes those books cannot be translated into Chinese because of ideological reasons in China. That means if we are waiting for the books to be translated into Chinese, you have to wait a period of time. And some of the ideas were deleted by publishers. But when you are reading originals, you can read the original ideas, the original language. So that means you have the advantage to get more knowledge, especially more wisdom, or more perspectives about this world. So that's what I learned in Peking University. So good friends, good books, English language become 3 main advantages that I have in Peking University. So there is a saying that you should always stay with goodness. You should always stay with good friends. I once read a sentence by Warren Buffett. He said like this: it's better to hang out with people better than you, pick out associates whose behavior is better than yours, and you drift in that directions. So going to university is my own choice. It's my pursuit. But when I was in the university, I drifted to the directions of my friends, to the directions of those good books and good thoughts, and to the directions of those ideas from original English works, So that's so important. So it's just to go beyond. Go beyond the original you. Go beyond the original, ideas. Because, in this world, most of the people, they just stay as they are. They never try to go beyond themselves. So by doing this, after graduation from Peking University, I stayed in Peking University, was chosen as one of the 5 students, stay continuously in the university, becomes a teaching assistant, teaching English to the first-year student. The reason I can teach English in Peking University as just an undergraduate is because at just that year, Chinese government decided every university student has to study English and pass kind of examinations, which is called Band 4 and Band 6. So every student has to study English, so no matter who can teach English, you can stay in the university, then teach students all over this university. So I stayed for another 6 years teaching, but the good thing is that I still have lots of time reading in the library because you only have to teach 8 hours a week. And then I become close friends with most of the professors in my department. That is also an advantage because when you were a student, it's very difficult for you to walk into the professor's home to talk or discuss something with him. But if you, as a colleague, it becomes much easier. But maybe like after 3 or 4 years, when I was a teaching assistant in Peking University, something changed. Lots of my friends, even my students, they began to take TOEFL and the GRE, and they want to come to United States to study. At that time, United States universities offered lots of scholarships to Chinese students. So I think this is maybe my way. I also myself should, go to United States to study. So I also took TOEFL and the GRE, tried my best, and there are several universities giving me admission, but none of the university gave me any scholarships. At that time, my salary is like 120 Chinese yuan a month, which is equal to $20. So I never have the financial, support from myself. That's the reason why I went out to teach outside in training schools. Because when I was teaching training schools, every month I can make more money. So my idea is that I should save enough money from teaching so that I can support myself to study in the United States University. But by doing this, it gives me another opportunity, another side of life. When I was teaching in some training schools, I see this industry is so prosperous in China. Then I start thinking, if I open my own school, if I open my own classes, then I can make as much more money than I doing this as a teacher. So I studied my own class while I was still a Peking University assistant. But Peking University was so unhappy about my studying classes outside. They gave me a warning. They gave me a punishment. And this put me in the kind of this very disadvantageous, stage. Then after that, I resigned from Peking University because since I get punished by the university, I think I stay in the university is not a good thing. It's not a good way. So I walked out of Peking University, studied a school which is called New Oriental, By doing New Oriental for 25 years, I have nowadays, New Oriental is a big education company with a group of teachers. About we have about 35,000 teachers teaching in New Oriental today. So because I have lots of experiences with students, I have been myself a teacher for more than 20 years. So I'm always thinking about what is good teacher, because education is all about good teachers, actually. So I think there's 5 aspects of good teachers. One is that first is good teachers should inspire students with the enthusiasm to pursue knowledge and the truth. I believe teachers should teach students knowledge and the truth, not just to help them pass examinations, not just for students to remember some knowledge points so that they can get a diploma from university. So I think good teacher, no matter from primary to university, the most important thing for a teacher to do is to instill students with a passion to pursue the real knowledge and the truth of this world. Second, I think good teacher should be able to teach and discuss knowledge in a positive language that stimulates students to think. If a teacher is indifferent to the teaching contents and to the student's mind, students are very unlikely to participate actively. Knowledge can be more meaningful when you teach in a positive way to students, and in a positive way to stimulate thinking from students. And the third, a good teacher pays great attention to the all-round development of students. Many teachers are one-dimensional in practice, only looking whether students have solved the problems in their classroom, whether students have learned the knowledge points, performed well in examinations. But I believe, in addition to these, it's more important for teachers to care about the development of students' personality, their well-being and morality, and their free thinking. Teachers should set examples to students in addition to provide them with advice. I also believe that teaching of knowledge must be based on wisdom. Teaching of knowledge is not to remember the knowledge, but to internalize knowledge into part of students' pursuit of life and career, into their wisdom. Fourth, good teachers should encourage students to chase their dreams in the future. A good teacher must always help students look into the future. Teachers should cultivate the students the spirit to do their best to pursue their dreams in the face of difficulties. Encourage them to not give up, just like my mother always encouraged me not give up. Empower them with perseverance and resilience. Because when we look into the beautiful things in the future, the sufferings and the difficulties in front of our eyes no longer makes us desperate, looking for the meaning of life, looking for the meaning of future. That's what the teacher should instill into students. And the fifth, a good teacher should also be an expert in family education. Like, I have a very good family education. Not only my mother asked me to read, but my mother, my father, my parents, they have really kindness, hospitality, willingness to help others. All these are become some part of my personality. And their perseverance in front of difficulties also becomes my perseverance when I'm facing all the adversities in my life. So family education is really important. So teachers should be able to fully communicate with parents. Teachers can greatly facilitate a child's growth in the right direction if they are on the same wavelength with parents in the child's education. That's very important. I think the above 5 points are my summary about good teachers, since I have been communicating with my teachers for almost more than 20 years. So, Oriental, I think most of you have already heard about it. We are nowadays one of the biggest education companies in China. Today, our business range is very wide. We start from kindergarten, like K-12 education, real schools, and then K-12 after tutoring, after school tutoring education. We have overseas and the domestic test preparations, and then we have book publishing, and we have online education, which I just took online education to get listed in Hong Kong Stock Exchange last week, actually. So we have lots of business. But for all these business, what we want to do is that we are helping students. Our education range becomes wider and wider, and including more and more people into it. From the very beginning, our slogan or our mission is like the bridge for students to go overseas to study, and the rainbow to attract the students to come back to China to do their own business. Because from the very beginning, we only do overseas preparations for students. Then later, we included all English learning from like childhood to university students. So we changed our mission to like Oriental is a place for you to study English. Then the third slogan or mission we have is that we want the students to come to Oriental to realize their different dreams, because we have enlarged our business scope into not only teaching English, but teaching all other languages, and then teaching Chinese language, mathematics, physics, chemistry, and so on, to prepare students not only to come to the United States to study, but also prepare students to study in Chinese universities. So but today, when we come to the core of education, we have another mission. That is, we help students to own the ability of lifelong learning, global vision, independent personality, and a social responsibility. I think these 4 aspects will be always our mission, because if you are helping anybody to have the ability to have a lifelong learning ability, to have global vision, or have an independent personality, or have social responsibility, then that's the whole scope of education, I think. Education is about, first, to help yourself survive, become enlightened. Second, to help your family and your friends. And the third, help your students. And then, finally, help the society and this world. So what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I have 4 things I'm going to do. One is that I want to contribute to the so-called holistic education, which is a whole person education. That means not only giving students knowledge, but also giving students personality, also give students free thinking ability, give students the potentiality to go beyond himself, go beyond his vision today, and go beyond whatever he already knows. That's what I want to do in my life, because every year, the Oriental enroll more than 3 million students studying in our system. And the second to do is the family education, what I already emphasized. Because from my own story, I know family education is one of the most important education in this world. If the parents are really smart and wise, then we can expect their kids to be smart and wise. So if the parents understand this world, then their kids, mostly will be a nice guy. And the third I'm going to do, because the technology has come in to change education a lot. With the technology coming, internet, AI, artificial intelligence, big data, computing, cloud, the education area has been changed so much. So the third thing I'm going to do is that to use technology combined with education to see whether we can offer more effective and efficient ways of studying for students and for ourselves. And most important of all, fourth, what I'm going to do is that I hope to do more to help children in Chinese rural areas and to get a better education. So one of my things I'm going to do this year is that I'm going to return to a rural high school to become an honorary principal or head of school. That means I will go to that kind of school. Most of the students will never get enrolled by university because the low quality education there. So I want to be there to become the head of school, of course honorarily, and to use some of the best teachers from the Oriental to see within 3 years of efforts whether I can send these rural kids, which they have no hope actually, to go to some of the best universities in China to see whether they can change their destiny like I have changed when I was a child. I think education, that's all about education. Education is to change people's life, to become better. So, in addition to satisfying ourselves with food and clothing, in addition to caring for our own family members and friends, we all aspire, everybody here, to do something good for human development and the social progress. That's exactly what the Oriental is doing. That's exactly what I'm doing. That's exactly every one of you here is doing. So we want to actually look forward to working together with other educational institutions, your institution and the colleagues, for the rest of the world to create a better education for this world. I often say, economy is for today, politics is only for politicians, but only education is for the future of mankind. Let's try our best. Another Oriental slogan is that a better you, a big world. Let's become a better you, and then
CityBridge Education, Katherine Bradley.
Good morning, everyone. I have the tremendous pleasure of interviewing today Wendy Kopp, founder of Teach for America and Teach for All. Wendy, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Wendy has been my colleague and friend and even mentor in this space for almost 20 years. So Wendy, thank you for the whole of that friendship. So I'm not going to do much about Wendy's bio at all, but she was born in Austin, Texas, did high school in Dallas, and then famously went to Princeton University, where she wrote her senior thesis on this nascent idea of a national teaching corps that would actually compete with consulting and law and investment banking for the best talent on college campuses. We're not going to do that story right now, but we have a sea of budding entrepreneurs here at ASU GSV. You had your own real entrepreneurial story with lots of those startup near-death moments. So just tell us a moment for this audience. What were those bumps like? How did you get through?
Oh, goodness. Well, as you all know better than anyone, every stage in the journey is a challenge if you've got big goals that you're driving after. When I proposed this idea in my thesis, I said, we have to start with 500 people, no fewer. A gentleman had written a memo to Sergeant Shriver at the founding of the Peace Corps, making the case that 500 was the number to launch at because anything smaller wouldn't seem nationally important and anything bigger would be unmanageable. So that was the idea. We were going to inspire thousands of people to apply in the first year, train in place no fewer than 500 of them. There was no email at the time, so flyers under doors, but we managed to get 2,500 applicants. We had the 500 people, we had people ready to train them, and we had no money. I mean, this is, I'm sure, familiar. So it was probably April, we're aiming for a school year start, and we had maybe raised $400,000 out of a $2.5 million budget. And I landed a meeting with Ross Perot. And I'd grown up in Texas reading the headlines about this billionaire who cares about education. And I told myself, and I wish I could be this persistent now, that I was going to glue myself to his chair. And I would not leave the meeting until he solved my problem.
Had you gotten in easily to see him?
Oh, this was like letter number 12.
Okay.
This was, again, no email. So this is like mailing letters, trying to get meetings.
Right.
Anyway, for some reason, he decided to call me based on one of these letters, and I said, I'm going to be in Dallas next week. Can I come see you? Anyway, the point is, I think I was in his office it seemed to me it was 2 hours. He came up with every other person on the planet who was going to give us money, and I kept saying, I know they won't do it. And he finally said, I'll tell you what, if you can raise the other $1.5 million, I'll give you $500,000. And that was the moment I knew. And how many breakthroughs along the now 30-year journey of Teach for America, it's just classic. But that was year one. We pulled it together. We had 500 people start teaching a year after I graduated from college. And that's when, of course, the real challenges began. And we went through a decade of unbelievable challenges on every front, like programmatically. How do we do this responsibly? How do we recruit and select not just anyone, but the people who are really ready for this and train and support them so that they don't just survive in the classroom, but succeed with their kids and learn the right lessons, and go on to be the leaders we want them to be? And how do we manage an enterprise and keep it afloat and all of the huge challenges? But it was those learning journeys, like the first decade of intense learning, that gave us the foundation to ultimately be able to
intense
scale.
Persistence. Everybody should remember that 12th letter to Ross Perot. So your early theory of change was really all about transformational individual leaders kind of scattered out into the world who would then do the work of changing the face of education. And you've had tremendous success. I mean, just to talk about a couple people, we have Mike Johnston from Colorado, who's now running for the US Senate. We have Kaya Henderson, who now works for Teach for All, who really presided over such growth and progress in the DC public schools. You've got Brittany Packnett and DeRay McKesson, who were some of the original founders of the Black Lives Matter campaign. Even Jason Kamras, National Teacher of the Year, now superintendent in Richmond. So just do a moment about that original theory of change, about transformational leaders. And I want Wendy to do this because she's actually migrated to an adjacent theory of change since then. But start with that.
A little bit. We've just further developed the theory of change, I would say. I mean, the big idea, even from the beginning, was to say, okay, how do we galvanize the most promising future leaders in our country to channel their energy into the arena of working with the most disadvantaged kids? Initially by getting them to commit 2 years to teach, but knowing that those 2 years would change everything. I mean, just like all those folks were applying to management consulting firms and investment banks thinking, I have no idea what I want to do, I'll just do this for just 2 years. But then, of course, they go to business school and back into those firms. So I thought, like, this will change everything. What if the first 2 years were teaching in low-income communities? So that was the idea from the start. And, you know, over 30 years, Teach for America has had now, 60,000 people sign up to do this, and out of 50,000 plus alumni, 80% of them are still full-time in the work. 60-some% in education and others in policy and in and around.
That's really amazing. Yeah, thank you. And I know you love all your children equally, but is there a particular favorite success story?
I mean, what I would say, I think when I think about like what is fueling us on and keeping us going in this, it's really more than anything what we've been a part of. I could tell 20 stories of 20 communities where Teach for America has placed a steady stream of people for the last 20 or 30 years. And I'll just share one, but again, I could share so many others where this came from, because it makes a huge difference over time to channel all this incredible energy into working in low-income schools. So Chicago Public Schools, I mean, kind of famously, a couple years before I graduated from college, the then Secretary of Education, William Bennett, said that this Chicago Public Schools was the worst public school system in America. And it's the fastest improving urban school system today, which is quite remarkable, right? Like and you read the headlines in Chicago, you'd never guess it, but kids between the years of 4th and 8th grade, so 5 years, are making 6 years of progress. I mean, in most urban districts, they're not even making a year of progress. The graduation rate from college, the percentage of CPS kids who are graduating from college in the last decade has gone from 6% to 19%. So, yeah, I mean, we're nowhere near where we need to be in Chicago, nowhere near, but that's really significant progress against an entrenched problem. Now, there are lots of things that contributed to that. I mean, so many things. I think if you get into it and consider, like, what would Chicago public schools be like if you took all the Teach for America alumni out? It would be a different place. 1,000 alumni teachers, 1 out of every 14 teachers who on average are moving their kids 1.5 years of progress in a year's time, are TFA alumni. 1 out of every 6 schools has their 80 school principals and another almost 200 school leaders in AP positions and whatnot. They're running more than half of the Noble schools, all of the KIPP schools, and many of the public schools, like many of the fastest improving, highest performing schools serving low-income kids. And then there are so many others, running the Chicago Public Education Fund, the vice president of the Board of Education, the head of socio-emotional learning for the district. I mean, I could go on and on. There are hundreds of them, thousands of them, actually. So that's to be a part of seeing, and I know we get so down on ourselves in the ed reform movement, but we're making progress. If we had any historical memory, we are moving the needle. It is hard. These problems are deeply entrenched. But to be a part of that and contributing to the leadership that's driving the change is the thing that I think is most inspiring.
One of the ways it's so hard is there's a lot of rancor in the field right now. And part of that is that we can't escape the rancor and the politicization that is in our country right now. But you've been at the epicenter of a lot of this. Much less so now that you're doing the international work. So when you reflect back, what are your lessons or what's your advice for all of us who are doing work that puts us right in the center of difficult political moments?
You know, the thing I've been thinking so much about, and Katherine mentioned earlier that our theory has kind of migrated, and really what it is just thinking deeply about what kind of leadership do we need. And I probably personally have gone from kind of an individual leadership model, thinking we just need a lot of individual leadership around the whole ecosystem. Enough leadership will solve the problem, to thinking we need collective leadership. Meaning we need leadership everywhere around the whole ecosystem. Leadership can solve anything. The right union leadership and school leadership and system leadership and political leadership. We've all learned we can bring the whole thing within our control with enough leadership. But it has to be leadership that is, first of all, diverse and inclusive of especially the people who've most experienced the inequities, but also leadership that actually prioritizes stepping up from the individual pursuits and creating the space to build relationships, to have the debates with each other, to reflect, to course correct, to think together about what we're trying to accomplish. We have not succeeded yet in holding that space. And that's what we're really thinking about. How do we develop leaders who will prioritize that?
So, Wendy, you and I have talked about Oakland, California, as an example of a place where you see the seeds of this collective leadership beginning. A lot of problems there as well. So can you just talk with us for a moment about what does that look like to move from a theory about individual transformative leaders to collective transformational leadership?
So I was sharing with Katherine that I was in Oakland last week talking with a few of the TFA alums who are kind of part of the picture there. And actually what struck me wasn't so much that we've succeeded in developing collective leadership, but that there's a desperate need for it. So, this is a place where there really is leadership around the whole ecosystem, a whole bunch of Teach for America alums and a whole bunch of others who are taking on every piece of the puzzle. Running high-performing schools. Even just the Teach for America people are, helping, running major parts of the district, the vice president of the union, the heads of the organizations that are, alongside many others, mobilizing parents, Go Oakland Public Schools, which has brought a diverse coalition of people together to advocate for change. If you drew the ecosystem, you would say there are so many people working at every part of the puzzle. And yet, look at where we are in Oakland. So they just went through, as many people know, this teachers' strike, and they came to an agreement which raised teacher salaries, I hope I have this right, 11% over 4 years. So, we have alumni who've been teaching for years, stellar teachers in Oakland High School who are making, $65,000 a year? You can't buy a house in Silicon Valley on these salaries. This is untenable, and yet that agreement is probably going to send this school system into receivership, so they're going to take it out of local control. They've got a really good superintendent who knows what the fate will be. So this is a mess. All the energy for 30 years on the part of so many people who've been in Oakland even longer than that, the TFA people alongside many others. But you know what the state of affairs is? Instead of talking to each other, instead of coming together and saying, let's get in a room and think about this, the level of mistrust in this city is massive. Anyone, I don't know if I'm hopeful. I think I'm hopeful because it feels like it shouldn't be that hard to come together. So there's such mistrust of anyone funded by anyone. So it's just like you must be doing, so even if you've been the advocacy organization that has written every bill to generate revenue for Oakland Public Schools, still, if you're funded by, quote, billionaires, you are the enemy. So we've just got nothing but rancor, when what we need those generous billionaires to be talking to the parents and the teachers and the advocates. Can we get together to listen to each other, to understand, okay, because there's always a solution, right? We need to come together to generate new solutions,
And
but we're so busy
to
just...
demystify, though? Is it we want the billionaires to actually be proximate to the parents and the students and the families we want to serve because the two sides will demystify each other? What are we going to, how are we going to get
solutions? I mean, if you read the article, The Dawn of System Leadership by Peter Senge and others, I mean, they've spent, longer than I, looking across multiple sectors at what drives system change. And their ultimate answer is it's collective leadership. It's bringing together all the parts of the system, which includes the donors and the employers as much as it includes the parents and the student. Like, bring together all the parts of the system so that people can see the whole picture and so that you can co-create new solutions. We need new solutions. What's the solution to this in Oakland? I don't know, but I know we will not figure it out unless we get all those actors together, talking to each other and listening to each other.
So I want to transition us a bit over to the international side of your work, but some of these lessons actually transfer really beautifully. So when you think about an international community that has done this, that has brought together lots of people who would naturally want to mistrust each other, what's an example of where you've seen it working overseas?
Well, first of all, we're early in the journey globally. We've been at this about 11 years. But honestly, I went and visited the Teach for All network partner, Untitled, which is Teach for Haiti and Creole, about 3 or 4 years ago. And I came back and said to my dear husband, I just saw the better version. And what they've done in Haiti, so the incredible founder of Untitled Haiti, Nadine Paul Deroli, spent 3 years before she launched in these rural communities where she was planning to work, essentially just building relationships and considering one question with the folks in the communities, which is, what do we want to have be true for our kids by the time they're young adults? So they co-created a vision for what would be true for kids by the time they're 25. And she then worked everything backwards from this, right? And took such a collaborative approach. So for instance, she's recruiting the participants she's recruiting to be teachers are, she's recruiting some of the top recent grads in Haiti. Only 1% of Haitians get college degrees and 80% of them leave Haiti, but she's getting some of them to stay and do this. And she's recruiting people who meet the same leadership criteria bar who are already teaching in the schools in these remote communities. And so she's built these mixed cohorts, at the same time investing in the leadership development of the school principals. So 3 years in, just as one example of what that kind of collective relational approach has led to. I mean, whole schools have changed their discipline systems to be a positive discipline system because they realize we'll never get to this vision with this discipline system. So it just shows you what can happen when we create the space and bring everyone, students and parents and educators and others together to consider really where do we want to go. Because it took a lot of change to change those discipline systems, just as one example.
So it was 2007 when Wendy founded Teach for All, and by 2013, you were really out of Teach for America in terms of a day-to-day responsibility, having turned the reins over first to two wonderful people now, Elisa Villanueva Beard, who was a core member and herself grew up in one of the communities that Teach for America serves, is now the CEO of Teach for America. So Wendy is really on airplanes all over the world, all the time. And I feel like your aha moment was when you realized how much we here had to learn from communities around the world. So start just with what you've articulated about how there are more similarities in some ways between some of our kids here to kids overseas than there are between our different groups here in the States.
So just quick context here is that I wasn't thinking about the rest of the world until about, I had my head down because we've got a whole bunch of challenges in the US. And I was just trying to make Teach for America bigger and better, but there was something in the water in the rest of the world, and within 1 year, I had met people from 13 countries who were just determined that something similar needed to happen in their countries. So that's really what led to ultimately the launch of Teach for All as a network of independent, locally led organizations in now 50 countries and growing that are all recruiting their own countries, right? Most promising future leaders, asking them to commit 2 years to teach, investing in their ongoing leadership as a force for change. So what got me into this was thinking, I believe in this approach. It's a powerful model. They want to do it. Let's help them. It hadn't occurred to me, because I think I thought of education as such a local issue. In fact, a lot of what was driving us in this work is thinking without deeply locally rooted leaders who are deeply steeped in local context and culture, there is no chance to have transformational change in education. That's the whole point of our organizations, right? Let's develop deeply locally rooted leaders. Ugandans need to solve Uganda's problems, so I'm thinking, great, this is an approach that can work for Uganda. But as we got into this, it didn't take very long, actually. It was really my first trip to India where I was realizing the circumstances of the most marginalized kids in India are more similar to the circumstances of our most marginalized kids here than they are to the more privileged kids in their own country. And once you realize that,
go deeper on that for a moment. What do you mean by that? Because that's a pretty powerful statement.
Because it's kind of the roots of the issues we're addressing are eerily similar from place to place. Meaning, so you've got whole segments of kids who are just facing a whole bunch of challenges that the other kids in their countries are not facing. And those challenges can differ, but often they're functions of poverty, inadequate nutrition and health care, all the stresses that come from poverty, inadequate early education, discrimination, racism, depending on the cultural context, but you've got a whole segment of challenges. And then those kids show up at schools never set up to meet their extra needs, and of course these schools don't even have as much resources as the ones that... And then you've got this prevailing ideology of just low expectations for kids. So once you realize, wow, the roots of the issue, and we have one theory of the problem across Teach for All. Of course, it's contextualized, but we've all agreed on this. This is the picture, right? So that the silver lining in it, I spent 2 years in this global journey being really depressed, feeling like we're fighting the forces of gravity everywhere. Because even the politics are the same. We think ours is unique, and we have a pretty tough situation in the US, but there are such patterns on every front, and you feel like you're fighting the forces of gravity until you realize the silver lining is, what if we were learning from each other across borders? What if local education leaders had the chance to understand what was working and see what's possible in other contexts? We could be moving so much more quickly. I actually think this is the only shot we've got at getting on a meaningfully different trajectory in our lifetimes, is to figure out how do we do that? How do we enable, both the cultivation of lots and lots of local leadership, but enabling them? How do we build the infrastructure that enables them to learn from each other across borders?
And have you seen some of the same issues we have here when you're overseas about incipient efforts to really dismantle hierarchy and empower a whole new group of people?
Honestly, actually, I'm going to Mexico right after this because Teach for All is doing a conference in Mexico. And, it's just a beautiful example of an organization that's basically concluded the only chance we've got to pull this off, because they're thinking, how do we foster the leadership of our students? Like, the students in our classrooms today are going to have to be the ones who very soon are going to be navigating the changing economy and solving these increasingly complex problems. So we need them to be growing as leaders. Like, they're not going to sit in rows and passively receive information and suddenly be doing that. So we need to unleash our students' leadership. So they quickly embrace this kind of student-centered approach. And then they realized we're not treating our teachers like that. And actually, we're not treating our staff members like that. So if we don't figure out how to operate in ways that unleash the leadership of everyone, we'll never get where we need to be with kids. And I have to say, I don't know how many people heard Reed Hastings last night, but when he was describing the lessons from his journey running Netflix, increasingly, lose control, or he probably framed it more, so that ultimately you've got a whole bunch of leadership everywhere able to navigate. Literally, it's like the playbook for what must happen in this work of ours. Like, we will not, and I think the US educators, we need to really consider what we're working towards for kids. Are we trying to grow our students as leaders who can reshape the world? Because if not, there's no hope to get anywhere else where we want to be. I think that's our goal. But if we're going to do that, then we ourselves in our own organizations need to operate radically differently than at least I've seen us operate the last 2 or 3 decades. Like, we need to figure out how to unleash leadership of our teachers, the school leaders, the staff members in our organizations if we're going to accomplish that.
And just one last question on international, and then we unfortunately will need to wrap up. So there's such biases here that I'm sure you have dealt with that we just wouldn't necessarily have anything to learn from overseas. So do you have one final favorite example of something we can learn from others? And just to frame this for a moment, I've actually visited Teach for All schools in the Philippines, where the average class size is about 65 students, and they have so many kids that they are taught in 2 shifts, one morning shift of 65 kids and one afternoon shift. Huge perspective difference coming back here and understanding our fights between 16 and 25 in a classroom. So don't comment on that necessarily, but what has the perspective given you that has helped you understand our problems here better?
It's interesting because I think what happens is, every culture is different, and of course there are brilliant people all over the world who, in different cultures and contexts, are innovating new solutions and whatnot. I wouldn't say it's, I think that nothing we would see would be Greek. It's not like, wait, what are they doing over there? We're all we're addressing the same issues everywhere. You realize that. But what you realize is how someone's focus can just be sort of different. So, I just spent a week in India, and actually similar to the Mexico example, they've just decided we've got to elevate student leadership. Like, this is going to be about the leadership of our fellows and our alumni, but this is going to be about student leadership. And they're rethinking everything with that paradigm. How do we partner with our students to reinvent our education system? And I have to say, I actually took my own daughter, who is 11 and goes to a very progressive public school in Manhattan. And her I'm not sure she's going to be able to finish her 5th grade year without going into battle with her own teacher. Her entire frame is different. There's so much that we could learn. I wish I could ship this whole room to India and we could just essentially immerse ourselves in the work that they're doing, because it's not so different, and yet it is so different. It's like around the margins. So there's just so much we can learn by taking a more global approach than we have.
But you have to be proximate to do that. So Wendy, we are out of time, but I'm going to throw you one last little question. So really and truly, as a human being, Wendy is Superman. She is on airplanes everywhere. She's the mother of 4 children, including that daughter who just went to India. So you have worked so hard building 2 big organizations. Your spouse, Richard Barth, runs the KIPP schools. Do you ever just sit back and think, wow, what would it have been like if I'd just done private equity?
I would have been the most disastrous private equity person. I feel very lucky, honestly. I don't know how. It was this idea just struck me, and I'm so grateful, because I never would have guessed I'd still be pursuing it 30 years later, but it just got me into this arena that's enabled me to work with such incredible people against something that matters. So I'm not sure. I knew I wasn't made to work in banks, so I think I just found my calling early.
And that's a wonderful note to end on. Please join me in thanking Wendy Kopp.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, with an exciting addition to today's published agenda, please welcome CEO of 2U, Chip Paucek, Chief Marketing Officer of UNC Keenan Flagler Business School, Jim Alessandro, and CEO Trilogy, Dan Sommer, joined on stage by founder of GSV, Deborah Quazzo.
Okay, are we on? Okay. Dan and Chip, you guys announced a big deal yesterday.
We did.
And rumor has it that big deal actually has roots back to ASU GSV. And Dan made a really great quote backstage, so maybe I'll get you to repeat that quote about ASU GSV. But you guys want to talk a little bit about the transaction? And
Sure. So we met 2 years ago in my suite here, and thrilled to be able to bring the two companies together. So if you think about today, right now at this time, it's an interesting time to represent elite universities, given the conversation going. And the commonality among the company is that we both believe that the university should be central in the lifelong learning of the student. And so Trilogy brings this incredible technical competency across many different subjects, and we're thrilled to have Jim here because in some ways I would argue that while the transaction got a lot of attention, he and I have been doing a roadshow here the last 2 days, I think the announcement that Keenan Flagler made an hour and a half later actually is the more important of the two announcements.
well, and that's really my next question. So Jim, top business school. Why did it make sense for you all to put your hat in the ring on the boot camp piece and adding a boot camp to your mix of offerings?
We've had a great, almost 10-year relationship with 2U. And when we got the news that this partnership with Trilogy, it quickly helped us see we could make this long-term play to accelerate our ability to offer these tech skills in a way that we couldn't do it on our own. We just don't have the depth or the bandwidth, and I don't think most business schools do, to offer these or integrate these tech skills in a manner that's that can evolve as quickly as the industry is evolving.
So you think about it, Deborah, future-proofing the degree, but also, more importantly, I think Dan came up with this line yesterday, and I love it, future-proofing the people.
Yeah, people.
It's future-proofing people, because as industries change and the nature of work changes, and the half-life of a skill at 2 to 3 years, especially in technology, it's very important for people to have skills that, coupled with a terrific, prestigious degree, if you can embed content that helps to future-proof the individual, the learner, I think that's the future of education.
So I'm actually here as the complete and total idiot who didn't invest in Trilogy when she had a chance to. So, but I did admit my error very early and often. You have to admit, Dan. Why sell now? You had so much momentum going on in your business. What was it that attracted you to combine forces with Chip and 2U at this point in the company's evolution?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just for maybe to start for other entrepreneurs who are out there, and there are probably many in the audience, Deb is being kind. She actually said no. So we had 2 university partners at the time, and we were considering raising capital early on. And now when I look back, Deb saying no was actually a very important moment that I think helped to define us. Because after that, we decided that we were going to bootstrap. We decided that what we did was we were able to get to 19 universities and 200 employees by bootstrapping the company. And I think that really set us up for a lot of success by making the model work independent of outside capital, and went great institutions. Shout out to Craig Driscoll and Highland out there. But once great venture capitalists came on, we had a proven model. So I thank you, Deb, for saying no.
Exactly. So anyone out there I've said no to, it's a good sign. Your business is going to be.
You know, it's incredible. If you look at like the growth, I had never seen in ed tech a company that grew the way Trilogy did. I mean, you're talking about less than 4 years getting to 97 million, 147% growth. Now, that's all based on student outcomes ultimately, and I feel like there is commonality that even in both of our businesses, when the student wins, the university wins. When the university wins, we win. And so it fits remarkably well.
Yeah, when we talked, the question was really why now? And I think there was just such a sense from the first time we sat down 2 years ago at ASU GSV, there was just a sense of aligned vision and values. And we believe deeply that universities are the center of education, and we can empower universities to offer programs across what we call this 60-year curriculum, or the career curriculum continuum, where learners, regardless of their background, have an opportunity to kind of continue their lifelong learning process throughout life. And we saw eye to eye on what that could look like. And you put these two companies together, and we can deliver that for 68 leading universities in 6 countries across the globe. We think it's an impactful platform.
So talk about the physical. I mean, obviously you're picking up some physical delivery of education, which is a new line of business for 2U. Talk about that and how it.
Well, I mean, I think people don't really realize how much of our programs are hybrid today. So, you know, as an example, our Master of Science in Midwifery at Georgetown is ultimately you don't want to go to a midwife that delivered a virtual baby. So we actually have to put people in clinical placements so they can go deliver the baby. So we have been hybrid for a long time. Now, what's incredible, what Dan has done is the notion of offering the physical expression. We think a couple of years ago, we acquired a company called Get Smarter, and that began our sort of march across the career curriculum continuum, short courses, now boot camps and degrees. And the reason I go there is the founder of Get Smarter always had a vision of physically expressing those short courses. And so, you know, by going to a place like Keenan Flagler and running them physically, so Dan's doing that at scale. What I think is interesting is part of what was attractive to us about the company is not just the student outcomes is where it all starts, but how they actually process the students in sort of a technology-based system where the curriculum is continually delivered through a feedback loop with the enterprise and the instructors. That was something that, you know, taking a little bit of out of our playbook, if you had IPO'd, there's no question that the tech-enabled services component was a big part of your story, and that was attractive to us. So it is a combination of physical expression with now online delivery. And, you know, in terms of bringing them to scale online, I'm not sure if there's a better company that could do that with them than 2U.
Makes complete sense. Jim, you guys, we were talking about backstage, you've been working with 2U for about a decade. Is that right? What have been the key learnings?
Oh my God.
I think we went into the experience thinking that this virtual experience was not going to create cohorts or a sense of culture. But what we're finding is because our students interact with each other and literally see each other's faces on the screen.
Go back row, baby.
Long period of time, builds relationships and builds culture like we never expected. And something that I think we went into the program thinking was going to be a problem has actually become a huge asset.
An asset. That's interesting.
And I graduated from the program. So it took me 5 years. So I was, as Doug Shackelford, the dean, if he's watching, hi Doug. Doug told me at one point that I was the longest standing student in the history of Keenan Flagler Business School. I'm not sure if that is something I should say publicly, but it's the truth. I did an IPO during the MBA program, but the reason I did it was for me. I didn't do it to eat my own dog food or for the hair club for Men Effect. I did it because I really wanted to take those business courses. And I would tell you, like, while an IPO is a little extreme, the flexibility that it allows people, why should you pick up your life, quit your job, and move to attend grad school? Right. And so if you can get the same level of intimacy, the same experience, you know, I bleed the Carolina blue, you know, you become a Tar Heel, not just a random master's student. And now, what's incredibly exciting is the fact that coding will be included for credit in a top 20 MBA program. I mean, that's pretty revolutionary. So incredible moment of one of our partners just leaning in entirely into this new relationship. So
Yeah.
I'm thrilled.
And it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Great. Sort of to kind of pull this all together and wrap it up a little bit, Chip.
Yes.
Now
Deborah.
you've got a great equity. You've got a very valuable stock. Obviously, you're on an acquisition mode. What comes next?
You know, I feel blessed 11 years in to be still doing this. I love it. And we're focused on driving the core business. We're focused on filling out the career curriculum continuum. You know, we're producing, and we hired 914 people last year. And I believe something like 84 people started on Monday. You know, it's like, it is heavy growth right now. And so I'm pretty focused on trying to make sure that we not only maintain the positive culture, but really try to improve it. You know, why should scale? One of the reasons I love hearing Reed Hastings last night is Greg Peters, the Chief Product Officer at Netflix, is on my board. Mm-hmm. And so having people around us that have seen scale and sort of understand how to think about the company as it scales is incredibly valuable to me. So we're pretty focused right now on driving. It's pretty rare you have this kind of organic growth potential if you put capital into the core business. Now, we are working on and pretty close to our first undergrad, and that'll be big news when we get there.
Will be big news. Yep.
But you know, we have our hands full here. Like what is happening at Keenan Flagler, I would argue to you, is a sort of powerful statement about what is possible as these companies come together. And you know, the Trilogy team that I'm sure are watching right now, I would say it's really important that they know that they are a huge part of the reason why we did this. As we engaged with Dan and his team, it is wildly impressive what these people have done. They've built a company with really good bones, and we're a company right now that desperately needs more talent. And so that was clearly part of the story, was bringing in this incredible group. So, you know, we're thrilled and, you know, honored, honestly, more than anything else. So.
Do you think this is a moment in the education technology sector for accelerated consolidation? Do you think we're
Sure. I mean,
you know,
I think a broader conversation needs to be had about investment in education being a positive and not being something negative.
Correct.
And I think this is the community of people that should be able to deliver that message, because it truly investing in education, you know, what I love about 2U is we're a business that does well by doing good. I believe that. I believe every day we have a team of people that come in, don't let the skeptic win, cherish the opportunity to really drive high quality student outcomes. But to get there, we did have to raise a lot of capital. I wish I could have bootstrapped, you know, and I'm incredibly proud that you did. We had to raise a lot of money, and it wasn't easy. And you know, we had people like you that did it early with us and supported us back when it wasn't obvious at all. So, you know, we're excited to continue sort of driving the process of eliminating the back row. You know, that's our whole thing here.
I love eliminating the back row. I hated the back row in business school. Anyway, thank you, gentlemen. Very exciting announcement. We were thrilled to have you here on the stage, ASU GSV. We're thrilled that the origination of the transaction actually happened here, so 2 years ago. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
I believe that education disrupts poverty. I believe that education changes the destiny for a family. My name is Jamie Kassab, and I am the education evangelist at Google. What I do is pay attention to what's happening in education and to be a voice both internally and externally when it comes to education. I am a first-generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. I'm the first in my family to graduate high school. And I was able to go to college, go to graduate school, and I've had this fantastic life because of education, so that's where the passion comes from. I can make an assumption, which is that I have a 500 IQ, and I'm a super genius, and that's why I'm successful, and that's what my wife thinks I believe. Or I can believe that there are millions of kids who are just like me in communities all over the country, all over the world, who haven't had either luck or opportunity or a combination of the two. And that's what I'm trying to do, is take luck out of the equation as much as possible. What's great about the summit for me is that I've gotten to meet some amazing people through it. As a matter of fact, one of my best friends, I got to meet him 10 years ago at the summit. So It's helped me build relationships, but it's also helped me think about ideas. I have my own personal agenda around what I think we should focus on in education, around equity and access and diversity, and I get to put those ideas into the heads of people who are building these tools, and that's always fun to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, in honor of the 50th anniversary of Sesame Street, please welcome President and COO Sesame Workshop, Steve Youngwood and Elmo.
Hello, everybody!
Oh my God. Hi, I'm Steve Youngwood.
Yes, and Elmo is Elmo.
It is great to be here with you, Elmo, and thanks for coming to the ASU GSV.
The what?
I said thanks for coming to the ASU GSV.
Mr. Steve, Elmo doesn't want to embarrass you, but is Mr. Steve sure that's how it's supposed to go?
Am I sure that's how what is supposed to go?
Well, you know, Elmo learned it a different way. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you know, but don't worry, Mr. Steve. Elmo can help you with your letters. These things take time.
You do know your alphabet very well, but Elmo, I'm not talking about ABCs.
Oh. Really?
No, ASU GSV, it's the name of the conference we're at. And something pretty exciting is coming up later. Do you want to guess what it is?
Is it LMNOP? LMNOP? You get it? Because
it's very funny, Elmo, but that's not what it is.
Yes, Elmo will be here all week.
Well, in a way, that's true. You and I will both be here today, tomorrow afternoon, to talk about Sesame Workshop and Sesame Street's 50th anniversary. But later today, something really special is happening. It's a pop-up event called Early Futures.
Pop-up. Pop-up. Oh, Elmo like that. Pop-up. Oh, pop-up like bubbles? Like how you pop bubbles? Is that what you're talking about? Pop-up.
Elmo, not exactly. It's a special event all about early childhood. Little kids.
And monsters?
Sure, and monsters too. You're going to have expert speakers, interesting panels, some really great discussions, all about the most critical time in a child's life for learning, the early years. In fact, Sesame Workshop is working with two partners called Promise Venture Studio and Omidyar Network. We want to encourage everyone to pursue innovation in early childhood development.
So, it's not about bubbles?
No, Elmo, no bubbles. But you know what? Why don't you and I go and try to find some? What do you say?
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, come on, let's do it, Mr. Steve. Elmo's always ready for a new adventure. Let's go.
Okay. I thank everyone. You're going to see Elmo and I back here on Stage X tomorrow during the lunchtime plenary. And please come to the Early Futures pop-up today between 2 and 5 at the Harbor Eye Ballroom.
Bye-bye,